Okay, Jazakallah khair. So yeah, thank you again for attending today's session. This is part of our monthly kind of workshop series. This month we welcome Ibrahim Khan, who is from Islamic Finance Guru. Okay, so a bit of a background to Ibrahim Khan. He's the co-founder of Islamic Finance Guru, who holds a BA in philosophy, politics, and economics, from the University of Oxford. He's got an ijazah in the memorization of the Qur'an from Egypt and a master's in Islamic Banking and Finance from the Markfield Institute. He's a graduate of the Alimiyyah program, which is a traditional Islamic scholar under the tutelage of Shaykh Akram Nadwi. He previously worked as a funds lawyer in London I can't even pronounce that word, Debevoise and Plimpton. And before that, it was at Ashurst. He also studied at the Chartered Institute for Securities and Investment and holds a diploma in investment advice and financial planning, as well as a certificate in investment management. He has lectured extensively on Islamic finance, investment, zakat in mosques, universities and schools around the UK. And today we are going to cover Personal Finance 101. So that is from an Islamic point of view. We'll cover a range of topics from budgeting to student loans to investments. I mean, me personally, I've been living out of my overdraft since graduating, so it'd be interesting to get some advice there as well. So yeah, without further ado, please welcome Ibrahim Khan. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Um,
Can you
hear me still?
no, it's cutting out slightly. I think it might work better if it does dip. Sometimes it works better when you turn off the camera, so that could make it a bit.
I see.
Yeah. But we can hear you now and see you.
Great. Okay, cool. Let me share my screen. And if it changes, then just let me know because I can always move places. Great. So hopefully you guys should be able to see the presentation, the Islamic Personal Finance Bootcamp. Fantastic. So firstly, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to the Aziz Foundation for organizing this. I think it's a fantastic organization. I think it's a fantastic program to try and help, support Muslim education. And what I'm going to do over the next 20 minutes, sit back and hopefully don't relax, but, sit back and kind of absorb it in very much, by way of just kind of percolating in the material that gets, chucked in your way. Don't worry if not all of it goes in or sticks, because this is very much a bit of a, a bit of a guide around the place, around the investing landscape, so that you kind of know what's going on, and then you can double click on things, as and when you need it in the next, few months, or years even. So let's dive in. So the first thing is, before we even get into the actual meat of this stuff, like why do we actually care about this as Muslims? And for me, I think there's three key reasons. The first is that we will be questioned about this stuff on the Day of Judgment. One of the five key things that we'll be asked about is our wealth and how we earned it and how we spent it. So, if we're not focused on that, if we're not thinking about that from an Islamic perspective, then that's, we've dropped a ball there. We've dropped 20% of the balls that we need to not drop in order to, achieve success. The second thing is that, if you look at the top 100 companies in the world, Muslims constitute around 25% of the world's population. So, you would expect 25 of them to be Muslim companies. However, the answer is a little bit less than that. Nadeem, any ideas? What do you reckon? How many are there?
I wouldn't even hazard a guess. I have no idea.
One is the answer to that. So that's and that's Aramco. That's mainly due to oil. And if you look into the next 100 companies, there's another one called Sabic, which is an offshoot of Aramco. So, we've got a bit of a problem from an economic perspective, and Muslims in the UK live in 44% of Muslims live in the 8 to 10% poorest constituencies in the UK. And globally, we're on average probably around 20% poorer than the rest of the world. So, this is actually something, the way I think about it is you're not just managing your own wealth, you're managing a portion of your the ummah's wealth, which has been entrusted to you. So, be a good steward to it. And then finally, look, this is an easy sell. The stuff we're going to talk about today is going to actually make you money. It's actually going to make you wealthier. So, that should inshallah be that helpful to people. In terms of what we're going to talk about today, four key things, a bit about personal finance, a bit about high-level investing principles, some ideas about where you can actually invest with the five main areas of investment, and then going away with a couple of action points. And I know that some of you are still studying, and then some of you are just heading out of your studies into graduate roles. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's particularly relevant for that kind of range of ages. IFG is an Islamic finance comparison website. We do lots of personal finance and investment reviews, articles, videos. Think of us like the Muslim version of Money Saving Expert. It started off as a labor of love back in 2015 as a blog, and then the whole thing kind of spiraled, and I packed in my corporate career and just went full time on IFG because I think from a mission perspective, I really believe in what we do. The mission in a nutshell is how do we actually make Muslims get better off financially? How do we make Muslims wealthier? Because we think that that can really help the Muslim community as a whole. And there's two key ways to do that. One is by helping them sort out their personal finances, and the other one is by helping entrepreneurs. And of course, today we're talking about the personal finances side of things. So let's dive in. Any ideas? What is personal finance? I guess Nadeem, you're on the screen, so feel free to fire away. Any ideas?
Personal finance, yeah, mortgage, I don't know, overdraft, budgeting, these kind of different things would fall under it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no right and wrong answer really. It's just everything to do with money and your personal, your personal financial affairs. Think of it like and I guess this is like from a high level, just trying to think about your finances. A good way to think about it is as a company. And a company ultimately is only successful if the money that it's got coming in, the revenues, are more than the costs, and it's getting a little bit left as profit. So the company wants to be in profit, and you are Muhammad Nadeem Limited, and what you want to do is have incomings coming in that are more than your costs going out. Because if that happens to a company, the company goes insolvent, it collapses. If that happens to you, then you get very stressed and you might go into bankruptcy, and it's not a good place to be. It reduces the number of things that you can do as well. So high level, the goal is that we want to increase our income either by doing more stuff or by increasing the value of the stuff that we do, right? So we've got time is what we're kind of trading for money here. So either we become more skilled, so we get more money for our time, or we do more stuff, so we give more time. So those are the only two kind of variables that we have to deal with. And of course, if you go into entrepreneurship, that's a slightly different thing. And then on the cost side of things, if you can reduce the costs that you have and maintain the money coming in, then naturally you're going to win out. So, logically, the two areas when it comes to personal finance where you can actually make gains and work out if you can make gains is, can I increase my salary? Is that where I should be focused on? Or can I, or other areas of income, or can I decrease my costs? And if you can achieve those two things, then you'll start going into savings territory, and that's where it gets really fun. Let's move on. Let me just click this. In terms of personal finance, there's four key things to think about. The first is make sure that you are out of debt and that you are that you have, a clear budget in mind. And this goes back to the point I was just making, where you want to be now, income is, £5, costs is £2, and you've got that positive difference left at the end of every month. Once you've got that going, that's great. And you should be using that saving to try and clear down any short-term debts that you have, particularly credit card debts. Things that have interest attached to them are very, very problematic, and you should try and get rid of them as soon as possible, because they have a very nasty habit of mounting up quite considerably. The second key area that you should focus on is getting yourself an emergency pot of 3 to 6 months, because in case anything goes wrong, you get ill, coronavirus, no one was expecting that to hit, and yet it did. In case anything like that happens, you'll have somewhere to fall back on and survive. And then finally, and you should put that into something that's quite liquid. And by liquid, we mean things that are very easily accessible. So don't put it into a house, because houses are quite difficult to sell. But if you put it into stocks and shares or a savings account, you can get hold of it quite quickly. Then the third and fourth things, perhaps not so relevant just now for you guys, but also really good information, is you should try and stop renting if you can, and get yourself on the housing ladder. If you continue renting, then particularly in London and places where there's high rents, then over 20, 30 years, you're going to end up losing hundreds of thousands of pounds. I did the numbers for myself, and it was £300,000 to £400,000 that I will end up losing out because I continue to rent and not get on the property ladder. So it's always worthwhile to try and get yourself out of rent and onto the property ladder. It's also useful actually from a cash flow perspective, because in some places, or many places, you will end up paying less per month in a mortgage than you will in rent. So you will actually, on a monthly basis, have a little bit more cash to play with. And then finally, once you've achieved that glorious mission of getting rid of debt, getting yourself, a safety net, and also getting yourself onto the housing ladder, then you're going to start building a diversified portfolio to achieve your goals. And every person's goals are different, and that it depends on their risk, it depends on timelines, it depends on lots of different things. And we can maybe pick up on that in the Q&A section perhaps. But the high level thing is, this is the bit where it gets quite fun, because now you can start building for the future. At this point, it might be worth, let me see what's next. Yeah, let's pick up on it around this. So, I've got this quite complex mechanism, as you can see ahead in front of you, of deciding how you should, go about spending. There's two broad buckets. You can either be skint, as the technical term goes in the UK, is the technical term, which is you're broke, you don't have any money. And the question you should ask if you are looking to spend at that point is, do I need this thing, and can I afford it? Because if you don't need it, then you jolly well shouldn't be buying it. And if you can't afford it, then you absolutely shouldn't be buying it. And then on the other hand, you might actually have some money now, you're not completely broke. The question you should ask yourself at that point is, will I use it, and is it worth it? Because if you're, as Muslims, again, there's an important element of looking after the environment, and of course, the world is talking a lot more about conservation these days as well.
I'm so sorry, Ibrahim. I just need to interrupt you, just because some people are saying they can't see the slides changing. I can see them changing, and I can see that you're in spending matrix, but I don't know, maybe if you want to reshare your screen, that might work, because for some people it's frozen. Sorry about that.
Okay. Let me reshare. And happy to share the slides with people after the call as well, so you can you can refer to them.
Right. So Faiza and Raisa, can you see the spending matrix slide now?
Yes.
Right. Okay, brilliant. That's working. Thank you. Please continue.
Yeah. So if you're not skint, then of course, you should think about, will I use it and is it worth it? And we're talking about conservation a lot these days. And as Muslims, we are told in the Quran that we are the khulafa, or we're the people who are supposed to look after this world. And if when it comes to our own spending, if we don't keep that front and center, then we're not really fulfilling that obligation. And when it comes to the way that we spend, if we're the kind of people that we hoard stuff, or we just wear it once, or we're buying things that are not sustainable, all of these things are firstly normally not financially beneficial for us, but also secondly harmful for the environment, and thirdly they're not really in line with Islamic ethos. The other things that really practically you should try and do is set yourself a calendar invite every quarter, where you just check into your direct debits at that point and just make sure that the wrong one, the ones that you're not really using, you get rid of them. Make sure that you also check in with your energy bills and your broadband and your phone pretty regularly, maybe every quarter again. With the energy bills, you can sign up to things that automatically switch you to the cheapest energy supplier. So people like the Money Saving Expert Energy Club is an option, and there's a whole range of these people now. Like, just search for automatic switching energy, and you'll get a bunch of people. The other thing that you should do is set yourself a bit of a budget using apps like you've got the Muslim version, which is Kestrel. You've got Emma. You've got Money Dashboard. You've got a range of different apps out there these days that help you manage your wealth. Yolt is another one, YOLT. And they will help you kind of see what you're spending, and also help you set a bit of a budget. I think people use it, and some people find it useful, others less so. But I think if you do find it useful, then that's definitely something you should explore. In terms of other things, given the time of life that you guys are at, particularly students, where you might be needing to buy large items like laptops and what have you. With laptops, I think, and with large purchases like that, where it's just pushing it slightly, and makes it a bit of a difficult purchase, I would say a few things. The first is, make sure that you understand, what are you using it for. If you're just going to be using it for Word and the internet, then you don't need to buy yourself a £5,000 gaming laptop, because it's just it's nice, but it's not relevant. And you need to understand your needs. The second thing is, look for secondhand stuff. If you can, because you can pick up some real bargains when you do that. Obviously be careful, because secondhand stuff, you need to make sure it works and that sort of thing, but you can get some good bargains. The third is, ask for a discount wherever you buy, because that can you often end up getting one. The other one is, don't always buy on sales, especially like the Black Friday sales, because often these sales are just an event to try and get you to buy stuff. They're not actually like selling things for much cheaper. So just make sure that you shop around, and don't just go to like Amazon and that's it. The other thing is, use buy now, pay later schemes, but be careful, because if you mess up on the payments, then that can A, affect your credit history, and B, it will cost you money as well. But if you are confident that you can keep up with the buy now, pay later schemes, then that's a great way of spreading the costs over time. And they are, most of them, they are actually Sharia compliant as well, because all they're doing is just spreading out the payment, and you're paying the same amount of money, and in the background, the people like Klarna and others are charging the seller and making the money from them, because the seller's happy, because it means more people can actually buy this stuff now. So they're willing to take a little bit of a, they're willing to make a little bit of a payment to Klarna for the privilege. And finally, if you're someone who's clumsy, then get yourself insurance. So for example, my my significant other half is probably a bit clumsier than I am. So whenever she buys a laptop or a phone or anything like that, we go for insurance, because it's inevitable that, and perhaps it's because there's a lot more kids around and that sort of thing, that items like that get damaged. Whereas I think I'm a lot more safer with my stuff. and just don't let kids near it. So perhaps, I don't need insurance. So understand your own circumstances, and know yourself. And if you're someone who's had a big, electronic item that's broken or something in the last year, it's probably a good idea to get yourself insurance, and that will save you a lot of money in the long term. The other thing is rent. I think that's the big outgoing that you will have over your early years. A few thoughts on that. The first is live at home if you can. I don't think there's any shame in it. And in COVID in particular, everyone was living at home anyway, and you save a ton of money, which will be super useful for you later on. So there's no harm in doing that. The second is, if you're moving into another city, then try and move not so centrally. Like, if you're moving to London, don't go to Shoreditch. Try maybe like Redbridge, or try something further out essentially, because that will end up often being a lot cheaper. And we'll talk a little bit about commuting in a second as well. And then the other final thing around renting is make sure that you do a film of the house when you move in, what it looks like and that sort of thing, and do a proper inventory, because a big hidden cost when it comes to property is ending up losing your deposit. So make sure you don't fall foul of that as well. And whilst you're in the property, make sure that you're regularly, like if there are any issues, then make sure that you're regularly putting that in writing to the landlords, so that, in case you move out and they raise that later on, you can say, look, this was not, this is not our doing. This is an issue from long before that we've flagged to you. In terms of commuting, I would say that, get a bike if you can, and use that as much as you can, because it's going to increase your life expectancy as long as you keep safe, and obviously it's healthier, but also it will save you a ton of money on commuting. Typically in London is a good example, give a lot of people that will be in London. If you can buy yourself a bike, that will save you around £1,000 every year, which is pretty significant. And a bike would only cost you, somewhere between 200 and £500, or if you're like me and like to cycle a lot more, then maybe a little bit more than that. But regardless, you will pay that back within the year, just in saved commuting costs. So make sure you take advantage of that. And then finally, get yourself a student discount on travel if you do need to travel. So you can get student discounts on the travel from on trains, and also the London Underground and that sort of thing. So make sure you take advantage of that. Student loans is another one that I think is relevant. If you can avoid it, try and avoid it. But of course, and perhaps, I'm talking to people who are not, that burdened by one, because they're Aziz Foundation scholars. But to the extent that you do have a student loan, then, try and avoid it. Work during the summers, maybe even take a gap year during your university to try and minimize the student loan as much as you possibly can do, and obviously get scholarships and bursaries instead. And the reason why I say that, particularly for you guys, is the hope and expectation is that you are going to go ahead and have relatively high paying jobs at some point. And for people who have relatively high paying jobs, they end up paying back the student loan plus some interest. So in total, if you walk out of uni with a 30 to 50,000 pound debt, you will end up paying around 70 odd thousand pounds in total. But if you can just massively decrease that by working on weekends, or working over the summer and that sort of thing, then you could end up saving yourself somewhere between 20 and 30,000 pounds. And to my mind, that's a pretty sizable amount of money, which makes a lot of sense to put some hard graft in, even if it's a bit difficult right now, because you won't regret it. Let's move on to the next section. So this is a bit of a personal finance timeline. I'll skip over the birth bit because I'm presuming no one has any kids. If you do have kids, the nutshell is make sure as soon as they're born you start saving, because that will actually save you up enough money to pay for their university fees anyway. If you're at university, we've talked a lot about that already. With your first job, for people who are leaving, graduate scheme, leaving their undergrad and actually going into jobs, you should get yourself a pension. You should sign up to your pension. And the reason why you should do that is because your employer is legally bound to contribute to that pension. You will contribute 5%, they will contribute 3%. But if you don't contribute, then they don't have to contribute either. And so if you don't contribute, you're essentially saying to your employer, I'm happy to take 97% of my salary because, I'm just good like that. Just have fun, you employer, because I'm happy to just work for less money. If that sounds silly, then it is. I wouldn't do that if I were you. And most people, pretty much every person, will need their pension to survive on when they get older. So it's definitely a good idea to get yourself onto that ASAP. Make sure it's an Islamic pension. Make sure that your employer is giving you an Islamic option to invest in. And if there isn't an Islamic option available, then go onto our website. We've got a legal opinion from a leading barrister, QC barrister, who's an expert in pensions, who said in no uncertain terms that employers could be doing something illegal if they don't offer you an Islamic option for your pension. So make sure you check that out if you need to, and give it to the HR and what have you, and make things happen. Once you get further along, we won't go into all of this stuff in too much detail, but I guess the upshot of this is, when things get a bit more serious, when you've got your first job, you've got a bit of money, it makes sense to get yourself an Islamic will, because this will be both good for you, because otherwise, if you die, your money will be distributed according to English law as opposed to Islamic law, which is, a potential issue. And the second is that you can end up saving a lot of tax. So inheritance tax these days is 40%. So if you have or you're about to have a sizable estate over the course of your life, it's worth getting an Islamic will, because you can actually mitigate pretty much all of that money, all of that tax, which you would otherwise have to pay. And that's, it can be hundreds of thousands of pounds that people end up paying over. Right. Well, let's get into that was all the scary stuff. This is the more fun stuff. So 3 essentials of halal investing. The first is, you should actually start investing. Don't be the person who just sits on the sidelines and never goes anywhere, because that is in itself an investment decision. Like if you took £50,000 and invested it over 10 years, that will become less than £10,000 in real terms because of inflation and because of zakat that will be due on it. So if you don't make a decision, you're just burning your money. You might as well, if you're not going to do anything with it, you might as well take that £40,000 that you're otherwise going to lose and give it to me, or give it to a charity, whichever you prefer. I prefer it if it was me, but that's my bias. The other thing that you should, and if you invested that money, on the other hand, you would actually end up with something closer to potentially up to £200,000. Like a 3 to 4x return over 10 years is par for the course if you're taking like quite a middle of the road kind of approach with your investing. So £200,000 versus £10,000, I think it's a pretty clear decision to make. The second thing is invest like the 1%. And what is this, investing like the 1% that I'm talking about? Well, we'll find out very shortly. The 1%, they invest consistently and regularly. They diversify their portfolios, and they have long-term time horizons. So if you have a look, the 1% on the right, they have a very diverse portfolio, and they are investing in things that are actually relatively higher risk, like private equity, hedge funds, real estate to some extent. But the reason why it all works is because it's all nicely diversified, and these things are actually the places where you get a lot of really strong returns as well. The good news is that on our website we've got a whole range of options like this that are Sharia compliant for you to invest in. So at the right time, you can check it out. And what you shouldn't do is just pile into just property or just stocks and shares, because that wouldn't be very prudent of you. Your grandmother was right when she said, don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you do that, you're going to, end up risking a lot of money if things go wrong with that particular basket. The other thing is be consistent and regular. Warren Buffett, his money actually wasn't that much when he was, 19, 20, 26, but then it mounted up quite significantly because he just kept at it. And of course, these days he's one of the richest men in the world. So being consistent is super important. The next thing to say is have a long-term time horizon. Apologies, give me a second. Okay. Sorry, I think I was trying to get the button to work. So the stock market over the next 20 years, it's going to be going up quite significantly. And this is not this is not just kind of an idle observation. This is what we've seen over the last 100 or so years. The stock market, if you just let it run, it will go up and up and up and up. And that's due to complex reasons such as inflation and just the fact that the economy keeps on expanding and various other things. But the upshot is have a long-term time horizon, and you'll probably be very well off if you just you don't even need to be a stock picker. Just pick a bunch of decent stocks and then forget about it, and you'll probably do quite well. I'll whiz over these. I won't go into too much detail on them. I'd rather leave time for Q&A. But the main areas are stocks and shares. And you can get a Halal Investing 101 guide on stocks and shares on our website. The next area is Sukuk, where these are Islamic versions of bonds. And again, there's a fixed income 101 guide on our website, which goes into a lot more detail on that. Then you've got property, every Asian family's dream investment. And you can do that, do DIY, you can just invest in property, or you can invest in all sorts of other ways as well. So you get these crowdfunding websites that pool together small amounts of money from lots of different people, and that enables you to access this property investment that wouldn't otherwise be accessible to you. And you have companies like Yielders and IntroCrowd and Igloo and Smart Crowd and Ethis and various others as well that you can find on the IFG website. And then we've got savings accounts, which are offered by Islamic banks. They are not massive, returners, but they're good in that they, should ward off at least some of the inflation risk. Although these days inflation is now expected to edge up to about 3%, and Islamic banks even are offering, 1.5%. So even savings accounts these days are not that safe. And then finally, you've got some more aggressive kind of investments, high risk, high reward, high return. Startup investing in early stage companies. So we've got an angel syndicate called IFG.VC, which does that. You've got crowdfunding websites that do that. You can do it yourself. You can, if you find interesting deals to invest in. And then you've got SME financing, where you give money in a Sharia compliant way, in a loan to businesses. And again, you've got these crowdfunding websites that pull together all this money for you as an investor, and then give it to, let's say, a pharmacy, and they will give you a fixed return over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. And there's companies out there like Gordos who offer that service. But this is relatively high risk, high reward stuff, and people should kind of make sure they understand what they're doing before they get into it. But that, if they do it well, they can make good money. Let's skip that one. And then that's it really, guys. So the kind of objective was, how do we make Muslims get wealthier? And the upshot of it is that we should help each of us get our personal finances sorted, because if we can achieve that, then we can hopefully achieve that objective. I know that's probably a lot to take in. We've got 101 guides on our website, which you can check out. You can also subscribe to our website, and you'll get a free crash course, basically, that will give you a lot of the resources that you can, that you can take in your own time at a slower pace than this frenetic 20 to 25 minutes that we've had. If you'd like to ask any questions and that sort of thing, or hang out with people who are into investing in finance, then we've got some Telegram groups as well, where there's tens of thousands of people on there now. Or for the ones who are gamers amongst you, we've got a Discord group as well, so you can check that out. But over to you, Nadeem.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for that. There's a wide range of topics in that. I've got whole host of questions for you. But what we'll do, we'll take one from one of our scholars, and she is asking, is there much or any difference between a socially responsible pension and an Islamic pension? Sorry, Ibrahim, you've frozen there. Hello.
Sorry, I'm just moving because I think the internet connection is a bit choppy. Yeah, so a socially responsible pension is a pension that's usually quite ethical, but Islamic pensions, they have additional requirements. So an ethical pension may well invest in financial companies, or even, invest in stuff like certain arms companies or alcohol, or things like that. It's not unethical to invest in alcohol from a mainstream perspective. But then obviously from an Islamic perspective, that's an issue. The other issue is that you need to have certain debt elements that need to be looked at. So an Islamic screen would not allow too much debt, whereas an ethical screen probably would. Like, it's not a concern. So socially responsible or ethical is not the same as Islamic.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. I mean, if there's anyone else that has any questions, please do ask. Just off the back of that, I did actually look into Islamic funds, and I did question a few of them, because I kind of take the BDS movement quite strongly. However, when I looked at some of the Islamic funds, they didn't. So when I questioned them about it, they said, well, good returns, legit organization, why not? So they weren't fully under that kind of. What's your take on that? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's something that I would like to do an article on at some point. I mean, maybe this is an article for you to do, Nadeem, where we would quite like to take, like the main funds like the HSBC Global Equity Fund or something like that, which I actually think Muslims can have a massive impact on that, because we're all of our pensions are in that fund. So if we decided to exit en masse, then they would need to listen. So yeah, I guess it's that's something I'm very open to doing on the IFG website, where we take the holdings that the HSBC fund has or other funds have, and screen it from a BDS movement perspective, and just let people know.
Jazakallah khair. Do you know, when it comes to Islamic banking, you spoke about different kind of investments, and you touched upon Islamic mortgages. Just don't want to stay on this kind of particular topic, but you had a section where it says stop renting. The problem that we find is that a lot of people, especially students, when they've actually graduated, got their first jobs, they have to rent, because they can't get onto the property ladder, because they can't save for a deposit. And then it's that kind of cycle, you're trying to just get out of that, build up a deposit, but you're paying so much in rent. But then off the back of that, also, when you actually do look for a mortgage and you want an Islamic mortgage, they're so expensive. I was looking at one yesterday, day before yesterday, and it was probably twice as much of what you would normally pay on a conventional mortgage. So just your thoughts and comments on that.
Yeah, it's not an easy gig. What I would say is, you have to try and get yourself at least some of a deposit to try and get yourself going. There are now some options coming onto the market that we will be covering in the next couple of weeks. Companies like Way Home, Stride Up, Halo Housing, Primary Finance, and others like that. So I genuinely think that there is like there's going to be a bit more scope than just Al-Rayyan and Gatehouse very shortly in the market. And we've got an Islamic mortgage comparison engine, so you should check that out at the right time. And the other benefit with these other companies coming in is they will offer typically a 5% deposit as the entry level, which is obviously significantly reduced from the Gatehouse and Al-Rayyan approach. I do believe actually Gatehouse are thinking about doing a 5% deposit, so you might see that in the next few months. And in terms of so that will hopefully help people get onto the housing ladder quicker, which will be better. But I do think that you might just have to hustle a bit, maybe do some extra work or that sort of thing to just get those savings up and running. Because as you said, it's a bit of a catch-22 situation, because if you don't have savings, you can't get into the property ladder, but you can never have savings if your rent is too much, and you have to pay rent because you don't have a property of your own. So it's a kind of catch-22. The only way to break out of that is either by by working more or or spending less. That's like fundamentally those are the only two things that we can control. I guess those are the kind of options.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. So let's have a look. Fixed spending, you said there are places out there for reducing your energy or your mobile phone bills and so on. What I've found is that there's other websites like Quidco and Top Cashback as well. I'll always go through them to get a better discount, and also you can go onto the comparison sites, so the Uswitch and so on. So that's a good tip. Let's have a look. Big purchases. So if you're looking for a laptop, I recently bought a laptop specifically for the degree because my old one was just too slow. And I found that there were other companies out there such as Very.com, PayPal as well, and even Currys that do allow you interest-free to kind of pay in installments as well. So there's different things when it comes to big purchases such as laptops and stuff. Let's have a look. Spending habits. How would you help me? I live, like I said, I live out of my overdraft, and it's such a bad habit. You had this slide where you said skint and not skint, and the mentality for when you're skint and mentality. So I have, if you swap them around, I am skint, but I have the mentality of not skint. Is it worth it? It's just that, I don't know how to break out of that, I suppose. For me, the way I see it mentally, that I'm next month I'll get paid and I'll get out of overdraft, but then slowly creep into it. So I suppose, I don't know, any tips you could give apart from stop spending, mate?
It's a tough one. I think look at your spending, and it might be that there's some easy wins in there where I don't know you the person, but if you look through your last month's statement and you find out that actually I'm spending a lot more on like impulse buys on Amazon, like I'm really into, I don't know, books or like gaming or something, and then you look and you kind of figure out actually the time that I actually do all of these random impulse buys is between 10 p.m. and 12 a.m. And that then tells you that perhaps you should not go on Amazon during those periods of time. So it's things like that could potentially help, just like understand and diagnose what are the actual underlying like kind of issues or underlying kind of themes, and then you can get quite a tight control on it using that. The other thing is it's a bit more draconian, but you could set, like you said, £100 or £200 direct debit into a savings account at the start of every month or at the start whenever your salary arrives, and it might mean that you are you're putting yourself into some difficulty, but then mentally you can always get that savings account money back, but mentally it's kind of sending that money off to somewhere else, and you now know that, okay, I just need to make ends meet with, let's say, £1,000 instead of that £1,200 that I had previously had, which I think can mentally nudge you into the right direction of being a bit more sensible with spending for that month.
No, exactly. I think when it comes to impulse buys, Amazon Prime is the worst for me anyway. So it's always. But I think what I've started to do now is that I won't open the impulse buy until much later when I've had a few days to reflect on it, and I end up sending it back anyway. So something's working there anyway. Look at so student loans. You know, I am doing my masters after a long time after my bachelor's, and my bachelor's I did actually take out a student loan. However, it was back in the golden days when it was 3K a year. So it's not as bad as it is now. So I feel for the people of this kind of generation that are paying stupendous amounts, 27,000 just for a normal 3 year. What I mean, are there alternatives to a student loan Islamically, or apart from making overpayments, how else could we possibly avoid or reduce or change that kind of?
It's a bit of a tough one, to be honest, because ultimately, if you're backed into a corner and you can't really go to university without a student loan, then you could reluctantly go for that. What I would say is that we actually did a video on it, I think a couple of days ago, on the halal student loan campaign, and at the end of it, we actually give some options about what are the alternatives that you can look at. So you should definitely do look at that, and I think that if people are resourceful, then it's surprising how much you can end up avoiding this stuff. So I would definitely say that. The other thing that I would say is that if you are particularly master's level or that kind of level, then you can get a lot of companies sponsor you to do things. Like for
Aziz
example,
Foundation, by the way, but yeah.
What's that?
Aziz Foundation.
Yeah, I mean, the Aziz Foundation is more of a charitable venture, right? I'm talking about like actual companies as well. So, if you're doing law conversion degrees or anything like that, which would otherwise cost £10,000 or more, you can get law firms to sponsor that if you obviously pass their like tests and what have you. So that's a great way of saving costs. And I would genuinely encourage people to think about taking gap years where relevant, because I know it might seem odd to take a gap year during university, but it will actually strengthen your CV if you end up doing good work in that year, which will actually stand you in good stead after your degree as well. No one else will have had that 1 year of industry experience that you have had, so don't discount that. And then ultimately, look, hopefully we're campaigning with the government to get like a halal student loan introduced. But if they don't, then we might have to think about coming up with like private sector solutions to this, and some other way of Muslim community helping each other out. But yeah, I guess it is what it is right now. If you haven't seen the video that we did on the student loan, then you should check it out. And you should let me just send you a link actually to a webinar that we did, and there's another recent video that we did as well. And if people haven't seen it, they should check it out, and they should sign a letter and send it to their MP, because we would like to put as much pressure on the government as we can, because they've promised to get this stuff sorted, but they haven't done for the last 8 or so years. So please do, take a moment to just send that off.
Okay, so we have a question from one of our scholars. So she says she thinks that there's a lot of pressure on people to get onto the property ladder, but she's also aware that you have to be financially secure to attempt it rather than doing it while scrounging to live. Wondering if you had any thoughts about renters for life, common in some European countries, for example, or is it a bad financial mindset to be in, to be a renter? I think sometimes, Islamically, from an Islamic point of view, I've heard the argument that, look, it's better to be a renter than take out a mortgage because of interest. And I suppose as Muslims, we are meant to be deathly afraid of interest because of how bad it's cursed. So it's a difficult one. How do you feel about the renters for life kind of mentality?
I just think that, I mean, obviously, if you're comfortable with Islamic mortgages and, I mean, shared ownership schemes, everyone is comfortable that they're Sharia compliant. There's no doubts about it whatsoever. So I just don't think that there's a financial justification to continue renting for the rest of your life if you can avoid that. If if you just can't, if you just have not been able to, get the 5% that you need together, then I just I think it's difficult, but I feel like that would be such a minute amount of people, especially given people on this call who have decent degrees, because it doesn't have to be in London. Remember, like you can easily move to somewhere like Manchester, Liverpool, Bolton, Blackburn, Bradford, Leeds. Like the world is your oyster, and in places like that, your 5% deposit on 100,000 house is just £5,000, which sure, it's still a decent sum of money, but actually that's very achievable relative to what it might be in somewhere like London, where it might be you might need to have at least £20,000 to even get the conversation going. So I think there's always options.
Okay. On the same subject of property ladder, mortgages and halal mortgages, how halal are they? So the question is, what do Islamic scholars say about halal mortgages? Also, is there any transparency on Islamic banks where they obtain their funds from to ensure they are from halal sources?
So Islamic mortgages, in a nutshell, we've done a very long review of Ar-Rayyan and Gatehouse mortgages. You can go onto the website and read it. It's we've gone through all of their legal documentation and done an exhaustive blow by blow review of them. And our conclusion is that they're Sharia compliant. There's a few quibbles that we have on a few different points, such as around insurance. But high level, we think they're Sharia compliant, as do most scholars in the UK, in my view. In terms of where Islamic banks get their funding from, to be honest, it's not that relevant, because if it was relevant, and the fiqhi reason why it's not relevant is because you're looking at your transaction with that counterparty. And it's not up to you to kind of think about what's going on behind that. If it was relevant, then there would be problems by anyone employed by the government, because where does the government get its money from? It borrows it off the money markets a lot of the time for short-term financing. It would be a problem for most people in the private sector, because most companies have some level of borrowing going on. And it's also like, it's just, from a fiqh perspective, the reason why it just isn't done is because it would result in absurd situations, like an investment banker comes into a newsagent and he doesn't get served because the newsagent says, oh, I can't take your money, I can't sell you these Kit Kats because I'm not sure of the origin of your money. Like this, it's just not it's never really contemplated from a fiqh perspective. Having said all of that stuff, actually the Islamic banks, Ar-Rayyan gets its money mainly from savings accounts that depositors have put into it. And it's got the underlying support of Masraf Ar-Rayyan, which is a big Qatari Islamic bank. So that's where the underlying money is coming from. And on the Gatehouse side of things, they get support from the Kuwaiti bank, I believe, is the original kind of mothership. So yeah, it's really a moot point either way, I think.
Okay, exactly. I think someone did ask me a question on something very similar, and I spoke to a learned person, and they said, look, it depends on how far the rabbit hole you want to go. Because, for example, if you went into a shop and it was a restaurant and you bought some food, the food was halal, but then you question how did he get that business? Did he take out a loan for that business? Was there interest paid on that business? What, if you want to go down so far down that rabbit hole, it's about where does it end then? So I think you are right in the sense that our transaction is with that individual, and where they get theirs, then I suppose is it a grey area from an Islamic point of view, or is it it doesn't concern us and it's fine? How have you?
Ultimately, look, this is a immensely personal decision, and you know, if you are, you should do your own research, you should do your own reading and look at the articles that we've done and others have done, and come up with your own, you know, conclusion. But if you're still kind of on the fence and prevaricating, then talk to the Islamic scholars that you trust and just, you know, go with what they say. Ultimately, look, the decision is yours. You need to get yourself in a position where you're comfortable about what you're doing. If you're not comfortable, don't do it. If you get comfortable, do it.
Yeah, no, Jazakallah khair. No, fair enough. Okay, Jazakallah khair. I think we are right on the money there for timing. If there is anyone else with any other questions, please do email us, and then we'll be able to forward them on to yourself. And Jazakallah khair for all the links. Please visit islamicfinanceguru.co.uk.
.com.
Oh, okay. Jazakallah khair. So yeah, thank you very much for your time today, Ibrahim. And thank you very much for Aziz Foundation for hosting this as well. And inshallah, we'll be in touch for the next webinar. I think, yeah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. So everyone, thank you for attending, and inshallah, see you in the next one.
Jazakallah khair. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nadeem. Thank you, Ibrahim. Really appreciate it. Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Wa alaikum assalam.